Okay, so to carry on, just to review what we've done so far, right? What we've looked at is how we can use the details view for all of our CRUD operations. Okay, that's great. Main limitation is the navigation, that we just kind of see one record at a time, and if there's a large number of records, okay, we need something to help us be able to navigate or search or find a given record to work with. We saw how we can use the grid view and details view together. Okay. By the way, you can have them both on the screen at the same time, right? Actually, in that online tutorial I referenced you to, that one that's from Pluralsight, he does his example where you just select a row in the grid view, and that brings that selected record up in details view, where then you can use the details view to edit it, update it, or delete it, right? And obviously you can also use the details view to add, right? So there's more than one approach. I just showed because it kind of works nice, and students seem to like this idea of showing and hiding, right? And most of the time that works quite well. So that's where we're using the details view just for inserting, and everything else we're doing in the grid, okay? And that can work fairly well. Just have to remember for the details view that we have to disable the view state so it doesn't remember the last values when it reappears. And we set the default mode to insert as well, so it always comes up in insert mode already. Then we looked at what if you have a foreign key, right? We went through, we modified our table, so we actually had a foreign key to think about, so it was a one-to-many relationship. I think we did a league, would have many teams, a team is in one league. And then we need a separate data source control to give us that list, that lookup list of the foreign key values, in our case the leagues, right? And then we saw how we could use a drop-down list and templates for editing the foreign key. That way we can show the list of the foreign key values, but we're actually binding to the integer inside the main table we're targeting, in our case the team table, right? That helps. It also helps if we include the foreign key lookup value in our projection, in the select. That way in item mode or read-only mode we can show the name, in our case the league name, right? We're just looking at the data in the grid view, for example. Just a note there, the same data source is also good for drop-down lists for filtering by the foreign key. So it's another chance where we can reuse the same element on the page for more than one purpose. And then we got around to validation controls in templated fields, right? I could go back and we could look at all the code we did, but I don't think I'm going to take time because we've got a lot to cover, and you have the videos from last week you can go over anyway. So far so good, right? Next things we want to do is we want to start using all those good skills we learned in the first half of the course, all those stored procedures, right? There's a number of good reasons, and we'll talk more about it in a minute, why stored procedures are better, right? Yes, we've seen it's great. We have this little wizard that can help it, writes all the SQL commands for us for insert, update, and delete when we just select the table, right, to select from. Yeah, that's nice and it's cute, but it's not necessarily the best way to do things. So we're going to start using stored procedures instead. Another issue we'll handle is what if something goes wrong in the database itself, right? How do we handle that? Violate a secondary index, unique constraint, or something like that, right? And then we'll also look at dynamically creating our validation controls. Okay. So database error handling, we'll get to that in a second. Let's get our new example up and going. For this, I'm going to go to our content by type, way down to our class database files and models, right? I've added a few more scripts up here. One of them is our medical office script. So I'm just going to click on that, open it up. I'm just using Notepad. Right, so this is the full script, drop and recreate a database for a medical office, doctor-patient, right? It's a one-to-many relationship. A doctor has many patients. Patient has one primary care physician, their doctor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all this, and we're going to bring it over into our new project. So I kind of opened this one thinking we might review, but I'm not going to. Let's go new project. We'll start a new in-class example for our medical office. Okay, so it'll be a C# web, .NET Framework web application. I'm going to create it in my same folder here off the root of the C drive. That'll be the folder that I select, and I'll name the application Medical Office. Or should I call it doctor's office? Oh well, this is fine. Okay. I'm going to put 18 after it just because it's 2018. Maybe I should put S for spring 18. That's fine. Okay, so I'll click OK. And as we've been doing, we'll still start empty so we don't get all of the other stuff, but we'll check off the core references and folders for web forms. That just gives us our app data folder and a couple other files to help us with our configuration later on. Okay, so here's our app data folder. So this is going to be a new database, and I'm going to use that script, right? So I'll right click the app data folder and add a new item. It's funny, in my system it comes up right in the list here, but it didn't for us. So there we are, SQL Server Database. Maybe I'll call it MO S18 for Medical Office, Spring 2018. So we'll just create the database, and if I double click on it, it will connect to it from the SQL Server tools built into Visual Studio, and should open my Server Explorer. It didn't open it for me, so I just clicked on Server Explorer. Okay, so it's empty, there's no tables or anything yet, but I can right click and say new query. That just opens up a query window, same kind of query window we could do in SQL Server Management Studio. And here is where I'm going to copy the content of this. Control A to select it all, Control C to copy, and then paste, Control V, right? So this particular script not only creates the tables and throws a little bit of data in, it also has stored procedures already written for us. Right? Remember though, I've got to take out these first bunch of lines. Why can't I select? Oh, and take out that use as well. So I want to just start basically with the first table. Okay. All right. So it's going to create some functions, okay, and so on. We can look at the code afterwards. I'll just execute it for now. And there we go. Query executed successfully. Show me some messages. I'm done with this window now. I'll just X out of here. No, I don't need to save it. And then in Server Explorer, I will just right-click the database and refresh. Now I have my tables here. I have a doctor audit, and a patient table. I have some views, right? So those are those views you talked about as a good practice. Create a view that includes lookup values and so on. So for example, if I double click the patient one here, then I can see create view. I can see all the code used. So this is using the date of birth, converting it, right? Creating a patient summary field and so on and so forth. Has our timestamp. We have a timestamp in here for version control. You did concurrency in the first half of the term, right? Yeah, okay, good. And it has an inner join, okay, between patient and doctor, so that we can actually include the full name of the doctor and so on, right? Now this is using a user-defined function. So this is a lot of the smarts that you learned to do in your programming in SQL Server itself in the first half of the course are being used in this particular script example. Okay. Also things we see in the Server Explorer. Come on, respond. Okay. Somebody mentioned I didn't have any sound effects going, so I've got to get some sound effects ready here. Okay, so while we're waiting for Visual Studio, okay. All right, so it seems to be all right. We're back up and running again. Let's look at all these stored procedures. Look at that, okay? What we see here are the standard stored procedures you learn to write. So for patient, we have patient delete, insert, select all, right? That's basically, there's no where clause, just returns all data. Probably, let's look. And notice we're selecting from our view, right? So we're getting all the data from our view that we had created earlier, okay? So that gives us the full name of our doctor, and the view itself uses that function to concatenate the name together, handle null, middle initials, and all kinds of good stuff like that. Okay. So we have our select by doctor, right? This is that filter approach, just like we did in class the other day, where our where clause looks for a parameter value matching the doctor ID, so we can filter patients for the one doctor, or, right, that our parameter matches our flag value of 0. Same logical approach that we used in the first half of the course, right? So we have all these stored procedures ready to go. Feel free to review them. You can just double click them, it brings up the code. You can even modify them and click update if you wanted to, but I think that they're pretty much all okay. So we have a full set for both doctor and patient in this example, right? So we could set up pages to maintain both, all using stored procedures. Oh. I don't know why it's not responding so often. Mustn't feel like working with the database. No, I'm not going to change anything there. All right, so we have our database with all of its stored procedures. Good. Now what we're going to do is we'll add a form. We'll start with patient. So we'll add a web form. Maybe I should start with doctor. Do you want to play doctor or do you want to play patient? Okay. Sorry, I didn't actually say that out loud. All right, we'll start with doctor. Doctors. As a web form. Okay, so first thing we'll do then is we'll add a data source, going to the toolbox. Okay, in our data section, I'll start off by adding a SQL Server data source, which will give an appropriate ID, DS doctors. Running our configure data source wizard. Okay. Again, we'll connect to our MDF file. Now we haven't created a connection string yet. That's why it's not in our drop-down list, right? We can see what it will look like. It's using our data directory. Later on, when this database is up in the Azure, perhaps, you could actually use the database connection string to connect to it in Azure, right? So we'll save that here as MO for medical office connection string. Okay, now we'll never have to use any of this because we already have all of our stored procedures baked and ready to go, right? So I'll just specify custom SQL or stored procedure. So here I can select stored procedures for everything I need to do. So for selecting, right, that would be doctor select all. Okay, remember the select all doesn't have a where clause, it just returns all the doctors, which is probably what I want here for my data source for all the doctors. But then for each of the actions, okay, I'll just select the appropriate doctor update, doctor insert, doctor delete, right? Now, we know the stored procedures for the actions, insert, update, and delete, all have parameters, right? But we don't need them here. That's why I didn't come up with a dialog box looking for parameter values. But we can test the query. And this will just test the select. So we're getting our summary, right? Our first, middle, and last name. Okay. So what we could do is we could add a details view. Okay, so we're going to use a details view control here, where our data source is our DS doctors, right? I'll enable paging, inserting, editing, and deleting, right? We have all these different options because we have a stored procedure set up giving the capability to the underlying data source. Okay, and maybe for now I'll just pick a format. I'm feeling like brown sugar, no, sand and sky today. All right, details views as well, they look funny if you don't put some header text on the detail view itself. So I'll just do that here, header text. I guess doctors is probably good enough. Okay. Now notice that it included everything here. Our summary, right? First name, middle initial, last name. Well, that's because that's everything returned. We can never edit the summary. We can leave it there if we want, or we could take it out. It's entirely up to you. In edit mode, it will be unavailable to change because we actually have to change everything through the actual fields. But if we go into the edit fields dialog box then, we know we can take out the ID, don't need to see that. Doctor summary, I don't know, we could probably just get rid of that and just say doctor. Let's try leaving it there for now. First name. Middle initial. And the last name. Okay. And the command field, we know we want to template that because we want to at least do that on client click to confirm that they really want to delete, right? So I'll make that a template field. Okay, let's just see how this runs so far before we do anything else. I don't want to use Chrome just because I've got Blackboard in there. I have my Jeopardy theme song in here. Okay, so we see we have our three doctors, right? We can step through them. Okay, our summary just shows the concatenated name. If I go into edit, right, notice that the summary field doesn't switch into edit mode. It's smart enough to do that for me. So middle initial is Z for fun. I'll click update, and we see how it immediately updated the summary as well as the data itself, right? But imagine we have hundreds of doctors, or at least a dozen, right? Then this paging would not be very good. But you see we are actually using our stored procedures. I haven't done my on-client click yet, so I don't want to delete anybody. I can click new. We definitely want to fix that issue. This should not be available. We can't type in the summary, right? Creating a new, that would cause a problem. First name. Oh, that's supposed to be an M. Middle initial. Too many arguments specified. All right, good. It gives us a chance to figure out what's going wrong. So we'll have to look at the insert and we'll see what's going on. So hang on one second. It's probably that darn summary. Because even though we left it blank, it was trying to give a value for it, right? So let's have a look in our code. We'll see what we have here. For our data source, okay? So for our delete, we just have the ID, right? First, middle, last, updated by, and nope, that's okay. First, middle, last, updated on, Okay, I'm pretty sure it was just this summary. So what we have to do is we have to template that. If we really want the summary in there, I normally would just take it out. But if we really want it in there, we'd have to template it and make sure that in insert mode that it doesn't actually show a text box, right? But maybe just for brevity, I'll take it out for now. We don't really need it. All right, just test that now, make sure it does work without the one field. So when I go new, there we go. So that was the problem. It was trying to pass a value, so it had too many parameters passing information to the actual database, right? Because it was trying to give a value for summary, and there is no such thing in the database, right? That's created for us by the stored procedure. Okay, so now we have it working anyway, right? We're going to see that summary will come in useful in a few minutes anyway. All right, but if I click Edit, for example, okay, we can't insert null into the first name. So that's the kind of validation issue we had talked about last week. So what we could do is we could template, right? We could template the first name, the last name, and then put required field validator controls in there, and that would solve this problem. No big deal, right? We know how to solve that. What if I haven't put my on confirm yet, but what if I click delete? Here is a different kettle of fish, right? We see this and we go, thank you, error message. I see that actually I have a database error, right? The delete statement conflicted with our foreign key constraint, FK_patient_doctor, right? In other words, there are child records. There are patients assigned to this doctor. To delete the doctor, right, unless you have cascade delete on in the database for the relationship, so it would automatically delete all the patient records related to the one doctor, that would solve this problem, but that's not what we want. We want to be prevented from deleting a doctor that has patients assigned, right? So this is an actual error, and if you look at the wording of it, it's pretty obvious that this is coming from SQL Server itself. It's showing us the error message that it got back from the database. So how are we going to handle a situation like this? No matter what validation controls I might put into the page, they won't solve this problem. It's not until I go to delete in the database do I find out about this, right? So that's kind of our next topic of discussion. Okay, so let's, I'm going to stop running. We'll get our PowerPoint back up, and we'll talk about what we have to do next. But we'll take a break first, because I just realized it's break time.